The chapter that, without its existence, would have completely changed the entire story of this game's ending. It was vital in the progression of Arthur's sickness, Milton's wrath being completely unleashed on the gang, Sadie rising as a leader, and most importantly, Arthur's belief in Dutch becomes visibly shaken. Well, people have gone back and been given so much more appreciation for the epilogue of this game and culture. Guarma is a little bit of an oddity. It's sandwiched in between two of the most compelling chapters. The chapter of Saint-Denis, leading up to the events of Guarma, concludes with so much uncertainty. It's one of the most action-packed missions throughout the entire game, with arguably the most shocking deaths of Hosea and Lenny. With them gone, Arthur is stripped of a very valuable support system. Hosea was not only a very crucial voice of reason for Dutch and vital in the gang's overall leadership, but he was also Arthur's adopted father. The father that Arthur had more respect for than even Dutch himself. Lenny was growing in his own right, with Arthur beginning to respect him more and more, not to mention how close the two of them were getting. I would argue that with the exception of Hosea, Lenny was becoming the most trusted member in the Vanderlyn gang as far as Arthur was concerned. And Hosea was gunned down in the street for all to see as an example of what would soon befall the rest of the Vanderlyn gang, and Lenny was just shot in the blink of an eye. Their deaths would be overshadowed with an overwhelming sense of urgency. Urgency to escape the jaws of the Pinkertons' rage. Urgency to escape the island they would soon find themselves on, and the urgency to return to the rest of the gang that they left behind at Shady Belle. And that sense of urgency is felt throughout the entire chapter, or at least the entire time the gang is on the island of Guarma. 3 out of the 5 missions that take place on the island itself immediately start back to back. Once one mission is completed, it immediately flows into the start of the next, not allowing us proper time to process what's going on, Arthur to rest, or for the characters or players alike to get a grasp of just how everything is going downhill. And that creates a few problems, all of which inadvertently. It doesn't help the case for the chapter, a chapter that has such a rich emotional significance and undertone. An undertone that I want to point out and discuss today is I feel the chapter doesn't give enough credit it properly deserves.
If this is a tropical paradise, so far it ain't up to much.
I'll go scope the entrance to that cave. Arthur.
I need to get some rest.
Well, you're right. We all need to relax.
Arthur's health is a vital component of this chapter, one that really is only fully understood once this chapter reaches its conclusion. Arthur's mentality and even first-time players are more concerned with what's right around the corner. How are they going to return to Shady Belle? Is there anyone to return to? Did they manage to escape the Pinkerton onslaught that was clearly coming for the rest of them? If there is anyone, what's their state? Did the gang manage to stay together? And how in the world would they be able to possibly recover from everything if they even managed to find each other? Now, I previously mentioned that's partially due to the lack of depth in exploration or time to process in Guarma what's going on when contrasted to the rest of the game. It's pretty difficult to immerse yourself within the island and the ongoing revolution when you can only see and do so much. But Guarma is the catalyst for everything going downhill. What Arthur's body is subjected to is incredibly difficult to begin with, even for a healthy person. Narrowly escaping with his life in Saint-Denis, Arthur then almost drowns as the ship they were stowed away on begins to capsize. The ship is already an environment he shouldn't be in to begin with. Arthur should be somewhere warm and dry. If he could, rest as well. Here on the boat, he's far from those ideal conditions. Out on the open sea, the sea mist or down the dark, damp quarters of the boat would only serve to exacerbate his condition. Granted, in the grand scheme of things, it's nothing when he almost drowns, but it's already detrimental to his overall health. Even if everything went according to plan, and they properly disembarked in Cuba, as that was where the ship was originally headed, this environment, along with the mental distress, the fear, the panic, the constant worry of witnessing everything that went down in Saint-Denis, and undoubtful and fearful at best of what they're going to be walking into returning to Shady Belle, it's still not exactly the vacation or a type of rest his body is still going to need. His cough does slowly start to progress in the chapter of Shady Belle leading up to Guarma, but this clip on the boat is the first time where he actually stops to cough.
Everybody, wake up! Wake up! Come on, Arthur! Arthur! Wake up! Wake up! Wake up! I don't know, but we are getting off of this boat. You come on! Would you get a move on, you sleepy bastard?
Please, go ahead. I'll be right behind you.
All the other times it does appear to be a little bit of a persistent cough, but it's right here where it seems it's the first time where he actually has to stop, catch his breath, and really commit himself to coughing. It seems like something you could be easily looking into, but again, it's an environment he shouldn't even be in to begin with. A few days on the ship, Arthur would nearly drown, only to turn up a few days later on the shores of an unknown island, visibly dehydrated and understandably exhausted. The exhaustion and clear sunburn he suffers from as he wakes up on the beaches of Guarma never fully leaves his body. The exhaustion is burned deep into his face, undeniable by the dark bags that loom over his eyes. That becomes the prominent feature of his face as we move closer into Beaver Hollow. The sunburn would soon subside into a pale complexion as an indication of the life being literally drained right out of him. That's just scratching the surface. He's held at gunpoint, captured, possibly beaten if you walk too slow when you're a part of the chain gang. He becomes a wanted fugitive by the island's authorities, having no choice but to get embroiled in the Revolutionary War that's running rampant on the island. It's the only way to escape, and it's just this constant pressure that he can't get away from, all while in an environment that's only making the clock for him run faster. As Arthur's put through a level of stress he would never recover from, he's exposed to this dangerous environment's effect on Dutch. During the downswing, the small time where Dutch is allowed to think, as clearly he's had a lot of time to himself. As with so many other things throughout this game, he begins to rationalize and attempt to put together how and why the Saint-Denis bank robbery fell apart the way that he did. While following the guide that he recruited in order to help him and Arthur mount some type of rescue mission for Javier, Dutch begins to put some pieces together. Believing that there is a rat within the gang's midst, he does allude a little bit to believing it's either Abigail or John, or possibly both of them, who set him up and betrayed him.
So what happened with John in that bank? He survived. Unlike dear Hosea and Lenny. The only one they took alive. Why is that, you think? I don't know. I was already on the roof. I didn't see it. And Abigail, I presume she was able to slip away in time. What are you talking about? You know, when I look back at all the chaos of the past few weeks, the apparent superficial chaos, I begin to wonder, maybe, for somebody, this is all going exactly to plan.
As he says, it's a little bit of a coincidence. He believes everything is going according to plan for somebody. It's the very idea that's further explored with this dismissal of Abigail, as she begs and pleads to do something in order to save John from his captivity inside of Siska Penitentiary, which would only lead to his eventual hanging.
What are you gonna do about John, Dutch?
John?
He's in jail.
We'll get him. Abigail, just not yet.
There's talk of hanging him.
It's not gonna come to that.
Dutch!
Not now, Mesa. Not now.
This dismissal and request for additional time to think is only met with anger, frustration, rage when John is freed from Siska. It trails all the way back to this time in the cave. Speaking of this time, the killing of Gloria. Gloria was an old woman, a native on the island of Guarma. Dutch recruited her to help him and Arthur infiltrate the compound Javier was being held in so they can mount some type of rescue mission for Javier. Now, Gloria ends up getting greedy and demanding additional gold from Dutch in order to continue their journey deeper inside the compound. On some level, it is fair to say that he did kill Gloria out of self-defense. She does pull a knife out on him. But if you take a closer look at Dutch's body language, he's already approaching Gloria in a very suspicious manner. The moment she pulls the knife out on him, it's almost as if he was mentally preparing to do something with some type of justification of what he already wanted to happen, and just once that knife was pulled out, his justification and rationalizing of everything completely gave way to full-on rage. And that's not even taking into account his method of killing her. Now, gunshot may not be the best way to go about it, considering him and Arthur are trying to sneak into a compound and not put Javier in any type of harm's way, but you have an old lady here with a single knife up against two grown men. I'm pretty sure there would have been other means to deal with Gloria besides slowly wrapping your hands around her neck and banging her head up against the ladder. Strangulation as it is a very personal crime. He let the mask slip, and it's something he's fully aware of because he backtracks and tries to defend himself by saying he knew Spanish. She was going to betray them. This lie would only work against him, with Arthur pressing him more, asking for concrete evidence as to how he knew she was going to betray them, and Dutch just says it was in her eyes.
So how did you know she was gonna betray us? What'd she say? It was in her eyes, in the way she was leading us. But you said you knew Spanish. I know human beings, Arthur. Are you gonna strangle me next?
If he would have just stuck to self-defense, she was going to rob us, it would have been left right there alone. At least Dutch's integrity wouldn't have been questioned. It could have been chalked up to the environment, to the stress, to panic on top of that. But instead, he lies to Arthur, who for the second time now witnessed Dutch firsthand cave into his rage and kill someone. He saw it first with Angelo Bronte, and now he saw it here with Gloria. Perhaps that killing on the Blackwater job many months ago wasn't so out of the ordinary for Dutch after all. But Bronte and even Gloria are killings that would stick with Arthur. This would lead him to call Dutch out on doing things that he told Arthur specifically to never do. Arthur and even Sadie would go on to notice that after the events of Guarma, Dutch would never be the same, further breaking up the gang's previous unwavering loyalty and firm belief in Dutch's vision, in Dutch's own ideas of where they're headed to next. Arthur would go on to even tell Charles that he doesn't believe Dutch even knows what he wants anymore.
I ain't always sure Dutch knows what he wants anymore.
Perhaps not, but he's always managed to figure things out in the past.
I know. Yeah, you're right. It's been, guess I just miss Hosea and his, wisdom, you know?
In this same conversation, Charles betrays disbelief in the God members and how they managed to get stranded on a tropical island, the very thing Dutch always wanted. It's an element that may be minor and is drowned out by Arthur's health and his growing skepticism of Dutch and his methods. However, perhaps Dutch getting a taste of being on a tropical island, his vision of escaping all the woes of his on the mainland, fighting modernization and the rapidly taming laws of the West, his vision of believing that these islands, far away from the life that he knows, far away from the troubles and problems, rapidly on his heels, wildlands that seemed untamed, and would continue to provide him with the life and sense of freedom that he's had always known. This ideal place to live and escape his problems were completely shattered when he realized Guarma, the very thing he pictured a tropical island to be, suffered conditions far worse than anything back home. It would realistically serve as yet another damaging blow to his plans and overall hope to live free. Hosea's death, Guarma, Dutch's real taste of a tropical getaway being nothing short than his worst nightmare, with more problems and fighting than ever before, Arthur beginning to question him more boldly than ever, the man who would once do his father's bidding without a second thought, and Milton's vengeful return would all push him deeper and deeper into a martyr's mentality, deeper and deeper into the counsel of Micah, who would rather be the golden yes man than a wise advisor. A move Dutch would do the very same time Arthur would begin to hound him for his unacceptable and questionable behavior.
What happened in,
Guarma?
Yeah.
Nothing nice.
What happened to Dutch? He seems...
I don't know. Seems as what began happening in Blackwater began happening years ago, maybe.
As Dutch begins to act stranger, Sadie would step up. Her initiative to take control and lead the remaining Vanderlyn gang members out of Shady Belle in the wake of the Saint-Denis bank robbery could have single-handedly saved everyone. For someone that has been relatively confined to the background and a person Dutch brushed off to then show enough leadership skills to prevent a massacre at the hands of the incoming Pinkertons is quite remarkable. It's something that's only further displayed when Milton arrives at Lakay Lake with a small army. Maybe it's such a small thing to get impressed by, but her knowledge of a trapdoor in a nearby building to lead Arthur in a flanking maneuver exhibits she's not just a blind rage and pent-up anger at times. She isn't a bad scout or too horrible at preparations. Clearly, she scouted this entire area beforehand. I don't want to give too much credit, but with her at least knowing this, I'd wager she knows this entire camp like the back of her hand, and has had some contingency plans should things go south. And pre-planning here really isn't an isolated incident. She is responsible for procuring a hot air balloon for Arthur to survey the fields out in Cynic in order to even confirm John's presence before they put together a rescue for him. Her ability to make level-headed decisions is destroyed about an hour later when she decides to engage in a fight with the O'Driscolls, and how she acts later on during the epilogue at times is a little questionable. Her notable slip-ups shouldn't be justification to lighten her very significant contributions. She steps up at the same time Dutch appears to back away, and Arthur struggles to find a new sense of purpose. Arthur's diagnosis shows an element to terminal sickness many who have dealt with it firsthand by way of relatives or friends knows there's a mental battle present. His diagnosis very clearly takes a toll. It's a shock. He's in denial, and he does check out. Not very significantly, but at the very start of Icarus and Friends, when he meets with Sadie to formulate some type of plan to make sure John is even still at Cynic Penitentiary, Arthur's visibly distant. He's in his head processing information he just received a few minutes prior from the doctor. As we journey into Beaver Hollow, his body, mind, and respect from fellow members all suffer, allowing us to witness a heartbreaking fall from grace.
I need someone to ride with me.
Do what?
Finish off them O'Driscolls. I hear the last of them is holed up at Hanging Dog Ranch.
I don't have it in me no more.
Fork in the Road, Icarus and Friends, two missions centering around Arthur's sickness, the ongoing problems of the gang, and the splintering of it with Dutch's reluctance to even consider saving John, who he sees as the person that's most likely responsible for every issue the gang is currently struggling to deal with it all to culminate in That's Murphy country. Introducing Dutch losing faith in Arthur, a loss in faith that goes both ways to a degree. Arthur's sense of doing what's right begins with him saving Meredith, returning her to her family, and having the option to reject the cash reward. A line of choices that will then continue into Beaver Hollow. No longer living for himself, he lives for those around him. Of course, going a little further, provided the player decides to do the more morally correct or ethically acceptable decisions. He runs into Edith Downs on his way out of Annesburg, and back in camp, suggests Dutch take a breath and not outright kill Molly, who claims she snitched. Something that's out of character for Arthur, someone that's always been incredibly loyal, thinking twice to save someone who is technically claiming to be responsible for the death of Hosea. And, if Arthur wanted to be bitter about it, is responsible for how advanced his sickness is. Running into Edith and attempting to reason with Dutch to think twice before killing Molly here and now, I think is also another way to look at Arthur's past, and how his mind is already changing. He's haunted by his part in Thomas's early grave, or at least his part in beating him while he's terminally ill, an action that found him in the position he's in now. With Molly, he challenges the very thing he's always valued, loyalty. It's further shown in Beaver Hollow by him trying so hard to save John and reason with Dutch, but there's so much setup throughout the chapter of Guarma that it's all kind of dismissed. I would say even Arthur saving Meredith the way that he does and offers to take her home, the position the gang's in, with the Pinkertons right around the corner breathing down their necks, is arguably so much worse than the position they were in when they were making the transition from Horseshoe Overlook to Clemens Point. Arthur and Charles at that time ran into a woman and her small children begging for help. Their father was just recently kidnapped and is being held for ransom. Arthur had no interest in extending a helping hand under the guise of the gang being wanted men. They're incapable of helping themselves, let alone how are they going to be able to help this family here. Their situation is so much more dire in comparison. I have my own gripes with Guarma. Missed opportunities, the island itself being so confined, missions rushing at a pace that just makes it all feel like a drag to play through sometimes. But all things considered, the entire chapter does set the groundwork for almost all of the most emotionally loaded moments in the game. Wouldn't be the same without it.